Hey there, my name is Nicki Traikos of Life by Design. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, I am talking about watercolor, but watercolor and lettering using a paintbrush and a nib. Wait, you say paintbrush and a nib with watercolor? Yep, I'm going to show you how I love to use a paintbrush with my watercolor to create beautiful, bold, strong lettering, but also I'll use that same watercolor in my dip pen and nib to create some elegant, flowy lettering as well. So let's get started. So to do brush lettering using watercolor, I like to use some very thin, fine brushes. I have a variety. There's a couple of 3/0, and also I have my number 4 here, which I'll show you. I'm going to use watercolor with a dip pen as well, so you can see again just how flexible these tools can be when you're lettering, and how just interesting the effect will be as well. So what I'm doing is just waking up some watercolor that I have on my big palette here. And of course, if you've taken any of my lettering classes, you'll know that lettering all has to do with creating consistent downward strokes that are heavy, as well as thin upstrokes that are light. So if you're doing that modern calligraphy style lettering, that's the idea of the strokes, that you have a nice, definite, thick downstroke as well as a beautiful thin upstroke. Now, if you're doing brush lettering that's a little bit more edgy, you can always adapt and create some nice, thick, bold strokes with a round brush, which is what I love to do. That's my personal joy when it comes to lettering. So with a brush, when you're doing lettering, try to hold it on more of a 45-degree angle. Let's do the word love, because I feel like we always can use a little bit more of that. So I'm creating pressure on my downstroke, really using the barrel, lightening up on my upstroke, and then pressure on my downstroke. I love that dry texture. I don't correct it at all because I think it just adds so much personality. Pressure on my down, and just using the tip to create a nice thin upstroke. Okay, so again, just really typical of all of the classes I teach with lettering, making sure that you're holding your brush though on a 45-degree angle, and that you're able to control your upstrokes and your downstrokes. Okay, now if you wanted to use a dip pen with the same watercolor that you used using your brush pen, it's super easy. So what I'm doing is I'm just using my brush to load the nib to make sure that the vent is nice and full. I don't really have side vents on this nib. I'm gonna make sure it's nice and full. And with a nib, sometimes you have to work on how quickly you move your nib and how much pressure you apply on that nib as well, because the watercolor can pool. Okay, so again, just working on watercolor paper here. I'm holding my pen directly towards me at a 45 to maybe to a 75-degree angle to the paper to make sure I get nice control and consistency of stroke here. I don't feel like I need to reload, but let's reload so we can write the word love as well. So let's use a more modern and bouncy style as we letter the word love here. So pressure on your downstroke, less pressure on your upstroke. Okay, so if you're working on a project where you want to vary the lettering, so let's use Stay Creative, because I kind of feel like that's a nice balance of letters. So what I'm going to do is use the tip of my brush to create some brush lettering. So I want there to be variation of style. So I'm just going to wing it. So it may not be even, it may not be balanced, but you know what? I'm okay with that, because right now it's all about practice and controlling your tools. So I chose to do all uppercase, and making sure that I create some variation too with my strokes, just for interest. This guy looks a little wonky. There we go. Let's fatten him up a little bit too. So just taking your time, I'm holding my brush at a 90-degree angle to the page to create some really nice bold lettering. And then let us use our nib to add some personality. So creative, let's see, probably started over here. So I want to make sure that the size of the word creative is sort of balanced with the word stay. So again, just winging it. If you need to put a pencil sketch down first, feel free. I have practiced a lot, so I have a good idea. I think my tines have split actually. I have a good idea of balance in the word. I wonder if this paper, I can see that my tines are a little bit split. I wonder if working on watercolor isn't the best thing for this very fine nib. Give it a second, there we go. So I just did a little bit of troubleshooting there. The ink wasn't running out of my nib. I can see that the tines aren't perfect. It might be because I'm working on this watercolor paper. So just a word of caution, when you're using a nib, it's best to be on thin, very smooth paper, like a marker or an ink style. But if you're finding that the ink isn't flowing, this is good troubleshooting actually. Make sure that I have a good amount of watercolor. If you start to move your pen and it's not flowing, rest your pen on the page, give the paper a chance to encourage that ink to flow by drawing it out of your nib, and you'll be able to start lettering no problem. So again, I think my nib is, I've used this one quite a bit for watercolor, on watercolor paper. So make sure that you save one nib for when you're working on watercolor if you choose to do that. Okay, but look at how awesome that looks. So you have nice bold version of the word stay by using your brush pen, or sorry, your water brush. And then you have a really beautiful creative font using your dip pen and nib. Okay, so play around with the tools that you have. Enjoy them, incorporate them together, practice on different papers so you can see what the effect is on both, and just give yourself a chance to enjoy the process without having to worry about your end result. So I hope you've been inspired to use some of your tools a little differently, get creative, play and explore, because really that's what lettering and watercolor is all about. So make sure you click like if you like this video and want to see more, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can be notified when I'm releasing new tutorials, which will be once a week, every Sunday or so. Comment in the comments below if you tried my tips and tricks that I shared with you, and I will see you in the next video.